The U.S. and Russia have over 3,000 nuclear warheads aimed at each other. They are at odds in the Syrian conflict. Russia objects to NATO in Eastern Europe. Russians are hacking U.S. institutions. And the U.S. maintains sanctions on Russia over Ukraine.
I don't know Putin. He said nice things about me. If we got along well, that would be good. Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet. She doesn't like Putin because Putin has outsmarted her at every step of the way. Excuse me.
No surprise, then, that the Russian state-funded English-language channel, RT, has plenty of love for Donald Trump.
Critics have blasted Donald Trump and predicted a quick demise of his political career, only to find out that millions of Americans agree with him. As his opponents continued to defend American interventions in wars overseas, Donald Trump blasted them.
Our foreign policy is a complete and total disaster.
Donald Trump injected ideas into the national debate that flew in the face of the Washington establishment.
We don't really need NATO in its current form. NATO is obsolete.
I believe we will have a very good relationship with Russia.
I think I'd get along very well with Vladimir Putin.
The strange bromance between Donald Trump and Russia has helped to give this election its reality TV-like quality. In 2015, Putin appeared to make the first move, as CNN reported.
Also, Trump previously said he would get along very well with the Russian leader if he was elected president. It appears today that that feeling is mutual. Putin reaffirming their bromance by calling the GOP frontrunner, quote, brilliant and talented.
But when CNN's Fareed Zakaria asked Putin about his statement, Putin was dismissive, as this video from Russian president makes clear.
You made some comments about the American Republican presumptive nominee, Donald Trump. You called him brilliant, outstanding, talented.
Вы известный человек в нашей стране, вот вы лично.
You personally are very famous in our country. Why are you juggling with what I said? I only said that he was a bright person. Isn't he bright? He is.
And indeed, as another Russian government-controlled media source, Russia Insider, proved, Putin did not say brilliant.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, what do you think of Donald Trump?
He's a very colorful person, talented without any doubt. But it's not our affair to determine his worthiness. That's up to the United States voters.
Yes, Putin said colorful, but he didn't stop there.
But he is absolutely the leader in the presidential race. He wants to move to a different level of relations, to a more solid, deeper relations with Russia. And how can Russia not welcome that? We welcome that.
But every reality show needs a mean girl. In the last week, the FBI's revelation of more Clinton emails has put the spotlight on her campaign.
Received a warrant to examine.
But on October 8th, as Donald Trump's locker room video was the focus of news reports worldwide, RT was much more interested in this story.
Now, WikiLeaks has thrown another spanner in the works of the U.S. presidential campaign by leaking transcripts of Hillary Clinton's private paid speeches to major financial institutions.
We've got to make sure that Wall Street never wrecks Main Street again, and we will.
In private, though, she says something very different.
I represented and worked with so many talented, principled people who made their living in finance. I represented them, and I did all I could to make sure they continued to prosper.
And this private-public difference is not limited to domestic affairs. It runs to international policy, too. As we know, the US is ramping up its rhetoric on imposing a no-fly zone in Syria. That's Clinton's public position.
I do still support a no-fly zone because I think we need to put in safe havens for those poor Syrians who are fleeing both Assad and ISIS.
In private, though, she admits, quote, a lot of Syrians would be killed.
To have a no-fly zone, you have to take out all of the air defense, many of which are located in populated areas. So our missiles, even if they are standoff missiles, so we're not putting our pilots at risk, you're going to kill a lot of Syrians.
WikiLeaks first released its hacked DNC documents on the eve of the Democratic Convention. U.S. officials quickly pointed the finger at Russia, as ABC and CBS News reports described.
The U.S. intelligence community said in a statement that it is confident that Russia's senior-most officials directed the hacking of emails from the Democratic National Committee and other political organizations. Moscow then provided the stolen emails to websites DC Leaks and WikiLeaks this summer, which in turn published them right before Hillary Clinton's nominating convention.
It all seems part of the well-known Russian cyber ops playbook, having already hacked into servers at the White House, the Pentagon, and the State Department.
By October, RT had constructed its rebuttal.
The Obama administration formally accused Russia of being behind the cyber attacks with the aim of influencing next month's election.
It's again absurd. Tens of thousands of hackers daily attack Mr. Putin's website. Many of them are tracked to U.S. territory. And we don't blame that on the White House or CIA.
Julian Assange spoke to RT's Going Underground, and he said this is actually not the first time the Democratic National Committee has been hacked.
Did they hack the DNC? Has at least one state actor hacked the DNC? If you read very carefully, they say it's been hacked many times over the last 2 years. And our sources say that the DNC security is like Swiss cheese.
Critics of the way the government has responded and others have pointed out that they feel like there's an effort to divert the conversation away from what these leaks actually say to rather possible theories about their origin.
But why the vitriol against Clinton? In 2013, Putin saw then-Secretary of State Clinton as meddling in Russia's election.
The first thing that the U.S. Secretary of State did was to give her opinion about elections. She said they were unfair and unjust, even before she got the monitor's material. She set the tone for some of the activists inside our country, gave them a signal. They heard this signal and started active work with support from the U.S. State Department.
Not surprisingly, then, the Russians appeared to favor Donald Trump. The BBC explored the situation. Here's what they found.
There was a survey recently by the YouGov polling agency. It found that in nearly all of the G20 countries, the world's largest economies, from Brazil to China, if people there could vote in an American election, they would vote for Hillary Clinton. There was just one exception to that: Russia. According to the survey, people here would vote for Donald Trump.
Ну, я думаю, Дональд Трамп. Ну, на мой взгляд, по крайней мере, он более честно, открыто себя ведет.
Ну, во-первых, как мужчина, очень интересный. Во-вторых, наверное, мне кажется, он более лояльно как-то к России относится, чем Хиллари Клинтон.